You know, there's something that's always bugged me about the prequels, and I bet it's crossed your mind too. Count Dooku was supposed to be Palpatine's Sith apprentice, right? Darth Tyranus, second only to Sidious himself. But when you really look at their relationship, something doesn't add up. Palpatine spent decades grooming Anakin, carefully molding him into the perfect weapon. But with Dooku, it's like he barely lifted a finger. So today we're going to unpack why the most powerful Sith Lord in the galaxy chose to leave one of his apprentices basically half trained. And trust me, the answer says a lot more about Palpatine's true nature than you might think. Let's start with the obvious. When Dooku came to Palpatine, he wasn't some raw, force-sensitive kid. This guy had spent nearly 70 years as a Jedi. 70 years. He was trained by Yoda himself, and not just trained. He was one of Yoda's most promising students. Think about that for a second. Dooku was regarded as one of the greatest warriors in the history of the Jedi Order, with skills that many considered to be exceptional and deadly. He was a master of Form 2 lightsaber combat, known as Makashi. He could hold his own against almost anyone in the galaxy. In Attack of the Clones, we literally watch him take on both Obi-Wan and Anakin at the same time and make it look easy. So when Palpatine recruited him, he wasn't getting a blank slate. He was getting a fully realized Force Master who just needed to be pointed in the right direction. According to various sources from the Star Wars community, Sidious basically gave Dooku Asta Sith holocrons and sent him to Korriban to study on his own. That's it. No intensive training sessions. No years of brutal Sith conditioning like he did with Maul. Just some ancient recordings and a library card to the dark side's greatest hits. The truth is, Dooku's foundation was already there. He knew advanced Force techniques, he was an incredible duelist, and he had decades of combat experience. All Palpatine had to do was introduce him to the dark side philosophy and let Dooku's own considerable talents do the rest. But here's where it gets darker, and I mean really dark. Palpatine never intended to keep Dooku as his true apprentice. From day one, Dooku was a placeholder, a tool with an expiration date. In the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Dooku realizes he was always just a placeholder meant to be replaced by Anakin, and Palpatine later confirms this to Vader, calling Dooku a proton torpedo who served his purpose and was gone. Think about what that means. Every mission Dooku went on, every plan he executed, every speech he gave, Palpatine knew it was all temporary. He was watching the clock, waiting for Anakin to be ready. And when that moment came aboard the Invisible Hand, Palpatine didn't hesitate for a second. Kill him, he tells Anakin, just like that. Decades of service, gone in an instant. Now, knowing this, why would Palpatine invest serious time and energy training someone he planned to throw away? It would be like spending months teaching a rental car how to drive better. It just doesn't make sense. Dooku needed to be competent enough to lead the Separatists and serve as a credible threat to the Jedi, but not so powerful that he'd become difficult to dispose of when the time came. Palpatine had a superior candidate in mind from the beginning. Everything he did with Dooku was measured, calculated, and ultimately superficial. Give him enough knowledge to be useful, but never enough to become irreplaceable. Here's something that really shows how little Palpatine trusted Dooku. According to discussions in the Star Wars fan community and various canon sources, there's strong evidence that Dooku didn't even know Palpatine and Darth Sidious were the same person for a long time. Let that sink in. Whenever Palpatine gave Dooku instructions, he appeared as Sidious and was careful about what he revealed, making it appear as if he had a secret ally in the Senate rather than being that ally. Even Maul, who was considered by some to be less politically sophisticated than Dooku, figured out the connection. But Dooku? He was kept in the dark about one of the most crucial pieces of the puzzle. Why keep this secret? Simple, because Palpatine didn't trust Dooku not to use that information. And honestly, he was probably right not to. Dooku was ambitious. He took on apprentices of his own, Ventress, Savage Opress, clearly planning to one day overthrow Sidious, just as the rule of two dictated. During the Clone Wars, Dooku trained Asajj Ventress as his apprentice, hoping she would one day become powerful enough to help him kill Sidious. This is the thing about Sith training. It's supposed to prepare the apprentice to eventually surpass the master. But Palpatine didn't want that with Dooku. He wanted a servant, not a successor. So he withheld key knowledge, kept him at arm's length, and made sure Dooku never developed the kind of power or loyalty that might make him irreplaceable. Every Sith Master fears betrayal, but Palpatine took that fear to a whole new level. He compartmentalized information like he was running a spy agency, and in doing so, he ensured that Dooku would always be just powerful enough to be useful, but never powerful enough to be dangerous to him personally. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one. Palpatine had been watching this kid since he was 9 years old on Tatooine. He didn't just see potential, he saw unlimited power. The kind of power that doesn't come along once in a generation, but once in a millennium. While orchestrating the Clone Wars through Dooku, Palpatine continued mentoring Anakin Skywalker, instilling a dangerous, ambitious side into the young Jedi. Every conversation, every act of kindness, every moment of fatherly advice, it was all part of a decades-long grooming process. Palpatine spent more time preparing Anakin's fall than most people spend planning their entire careers. Compare that to Dooku. When Maul was killed on Naboo, Palpatine needed someone immediately. He couldn't wait years for Anakin to be ready. The Clone Wars needed to happen on his schedule, so he recruited the most qualified candidate available, a disillusioned former Jedi with the skills, resources, and political connections to pull it off. Dooku was the perfect interim solution. But interim is the key word here. Palpatine knew that Anakin's potential dwarfed Dooku's, regardless of how skilled the Count was. When you're planning to rule the galaxy for potentially centuries through clone bodies and dark side manipulation, you don't settle for good enough. You wait for perfect. And Anakin was as close to perfect as you could get. So why waste time giving Dooku extensive Sith training when you've already found your real apprentice? It's like spending years training for a marathon when you've already bought a sports car. Sure, the training has some value, but it's not really necessary for where you're trying to go. When you step back and look at the big picture, Palpatine's treatment of Dooku reveals something really disturbing about how he viewed everyone around him. They weren't people. They weren't even really apprentices in the traditional sense. They were chess pieces, tools to be used and discarded. Palpatine judged the value of his apprentices as tools to use, not as allies or friends. Even Vader, who Palpatine clearly valued more than Maul or Dooku, was still ultimately disposable. We see that in the original trilogy when Palpatine is ready to replace him with Luke without a second thought. Young Skywalker will become far more powerful than either of us, he tells Vader, basically announcing his obsolescence to his face. This is why minimal training for Dooku made perfect sense from Palpatine's twisted perspective. Why invest emotionally or educationally in someone you're planning to betray? Why share the deeper mysteries of the Sith with someone who's just filling a temporary role? Dooku was meant to be a figurehead, a scapegoat, and eventually a sacrifice to cement Anakin's turn to the dark side. And here's the really sad part. That moment in Revenge of the Sith when Anakin kills Dooku. Christopher Lee's performance is haunting. You can see it in Dooku's eyes. He realizes in that final moment that he never mattered. All his plans, all his ambitions, all his service to Sidious, it was all for nothing. He was never going to rule alongside his master. He was always just bait on a hook, waiting for the bigger fish to bite. So there you have it. Palpatine barely trained Dooku because he didn't need to, didn't want to, and never planned to keep him around long enough for it to matter. Dooku came preloaded with decades of Jedi training, making him perfect for what Palpatine needed. A competent temporary apprentice who could jumpstart the Clone Wars while Anakin ripened on the vine. It's cold, it's calculating, and it's pure Palpatine. In the game of Sith politics, Dooku thought he was a player, but really he was just another pawn who never even saw the whole board. What do you think? Was Dooku's fate sealed from the moment he joined Sidious, or could things have played out differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button and subscribe for more Star Wars deep dives. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one.